And speaking of where the game starts, it kind of starts today and really kind of started yesterday, right? And that
Right.
is because the NFL trade deadline is looming. 4 p.m. Eastern time today is when all trades have to be finalized. And it kind of started to trickle down yesterday. And granted, we know that it's not nearly the excitement and the shocks of an NBA or an MLB trade, not even in the least, right?
Yeah,
Those
yeah,
are
yeah. It's
fun.
not
But
that's
it's had a little bit of an
yeah,
uptick when you think about Robert Quinn, and that was kind of close to the deadline, not necessarily at the deadline, but that was a big name. But even a bigger name here because we talked about him earlier in the season when Roquan Smith said, "Get me up out of the shy."
right.
So when he started talking about that, everybody, including the Atlanta metro area, started talking about that former dog. And it turns out he's actually going to a space. As a Steelers fan, it devastates me, but I think it's a great fit for Roquan Smith up in Baltimore, and I think he's going to do
Right.
big things. Now, the big thing for us is that we're looking at Flowery Branch to see what is going to happen, if anything, at this trade deadline. Now, they're in a peculiar situation that maybe even they didn't expect to be, which is the top of the NFC South going into the
Mhm.
ninth game of the season. So that puts them in contention. They're right there in the thick of things. So, with
Right.
that in mind, Jarvis, I mean, would you say, and also based on some of the injuries that they have, players returning, players who are going to be out for a couple of weeks? I mean, I think if they make a move, it's probably going to be minor. But what do you think?
To be honest with you, I think there's a minor move to be made. I'm not real big into major moves because
Agreed.
I know a lot of people, throwing names like Bradley Chubb out there. Now, granted,
Mhm.
he's a
He's a
really
stud.
good football.
Yeah,
He's a good
no
football
question.
player, but he's in the last year of his contract, and that man is
Mhm.
trying to get paid. So, I'm always buyer beware when it comes to those guys because
Mhm.
when you think about going through a rookie contract, most of the time, as far as it's a 4-year deal at least, and then if you're in the first round, you have that fifth year option. And you get
Right.
into your last year, your deal, and you're just now proving that
Mhm.
you belong and you were worth that pick.
Right.
I have concerns. I have
Right.
questions. So, I'm not
Right.
necessarily saying I'm not going to pay the person, but I will have to go through a thought process as to whether or not I want this guy on my team because I have to think about whether or not I'm going to get that consistent play. With that being said, Terry Fontenot, stay away from guys like that. Stay away from guys like that. Guys you need to look at are guys who are veterans, who've been in the
Mhm.
league for quite some time or on a couple contracts. Guys who aren't looking for that much amount of money. A guy that
Mhm.
maybe be in the last year of his contract, um, that is probably looking to play for a couple more years in the NFL because that's where you still need to. I know people are already talking about, oh, you got all this money, all this money. Like you got to pay folks. It's
Right.
up people coming up for contracts here. How about the
Hello.
best guard, probably the best guard in the
Yep.
NFL? Yep, that's Chris Lindstrom. Yeah, that's here. So
Yeah.
yeah, buyer beware. And also you got AJ Terrell, the dude who's down right
Mhm.
now, the dude who was the second highest rated cornerback last year, right
Mhm.
behind Jalen Ramsey. Yeah, he got to get paid too. So yeah,
Exactly.
calm down on. We got all this money.
Mhm.
I understand what you're saying, but
Right.
when you think about taking care of your people first before you go out there and spending money on other folks,
Mhm.
you don't have as much as you think. So yeah,
Right.
I'm with the minor move T.
Mhm.
But as far as anything major and
Right.
bringing in guys or who's going to be around here for a long time, nah, I'm
Mhm.
cool on that right now. I
Right.
prefer you go get those guys yourself in the draft next year.
Agreed. And you could they can say, "Oh, we'll make a major move for a guy who will be around for a long time," but you don't know that. You absolutely
Mhm.
don't know that because it really kind of is like rent a player for the back half of the season.
Right,
And I'd
exactly.
rather and again, not to sound negative, but this is still a teeter-tottering NFC South. Anything can happen on the backside of this season. Tom Brady could get his head right. Uh, they'll have players coming back for the Bucks from injuries.
The
The
offensive line can
Falcons
figure out how to block. You never
exactly.
know.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah, because remember, they had an O-line, they
Yes,
had an
they
O-line.
did.
And
They
Donovan
did.
Smith, for example, is still Donovan Smith. He may have some moments, but he's still there and there's still a good wide receiver core. So they still have core pieces that could
Right.
put them right back in the mix. So then the question becomes if it's a kind of an up and down situation as far as getting in the playoffs and probably getting to the postseason, the only route for the Falcons is probably NFC South because
That's
you
it.
have
Yep.
so many other teams that are probably going to get that wild card spot before the Falcons could. So if that's the case, then you have to decide is it really worth it? Because like you said, you've got players here already that you need to take care of. And then there may be some free agents who are available next season that you're like, nah, I'm just going to wait to see what they're about, who's available, and see if I can get them into a 2 to 3 year contract or 5 year contract that works best for this team. Now, speaking of what might work best, I say Jarvis says that ATL Day Ones works best for you guys all the time. And I mean, that's what you say because you always give us 5-star reviews and we appreciate
Yes,
you for that. But you
appreciate
know
that.
what else works for you is if you don't just stop here at ATL Day Ones, a part of the Locked On Atlanta network, but if you also take a look at listen to Locked On Sports Today, the reason being, think about what we just talked about. The biggest stories of the day, they're going to be breaking down everything that has happened today and leading up to this trade deadline, instant reactions. They'll talk about some big games and the big games, Jarvis, they might actually switch from what they would have been just a day ago based on some of these moves of players. So if you want to get that kind of information and then you want to have a little fun with it as well, because they've got their version of For the Culture, like we have on ATL Day Ones, and the Locked On Today crew is definitely for you. They're going to give you their take of the day. And just like you get us on your Odyssey app or YouTube or wherever you download your podcasts, that's where you can get Locked On Sports Today as well. Now, Jarvis, this is another thing that I thought of too when you think about where you can get that player from, right? Whether that's
Right.
a rent a player or whether that's somebody that might have some permanent implications. But here's something that could be, I think, could be an option for the Falcons as well that I know I certainly would be okay with. What if they don't make a move at all? What if they don't make a move at all? Because when Terry Fontenot goes to make those calls or receive calls, the numbers just don't add up. It just does not make sense for the
Right.
Falcons. So that's another, to me, another option for them is to just stand pat at the trade deadline.
I'm with you. I would be perfectly fine with that
Mhm.
because here's the thing: Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith. One thing about those, I know for a fact that those guys are on the same page.
Yes.
Is the fact that they trust the guys they brought in on this
Mhm.
53. They trust that
Mhm.
roster to the
Mhm.
death, and I understand it because I see
Mhm.
the talent. You know, they
Yes.
not to say sit up here and say like they have the best roster in the NFL. I'm not saying
Mhm.
that, but they do have guys just in case their starters go down that hey, they could be viable fill-ins, and
Yeah.
that's all you need. That's how, when you're building constructing a roster. That's all you
Mhm.
need, to be honest
Yep.
with you, from a general manager standpoint.
Yes.
So
Yep.
I think that I would be perfectly fine with that. But I think the main thing is making sure that you do your due diligence
Yes.
because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you give a certain round, or let's say a fourth round pick for a
Right.
guy. Like, oh yeah, it's a
Mhm.
fourth round pick, but
Right.
guess what?
Mhm.
That draft comes around and they end up getting a guy that might be somebody that can help out a Grady Jarrett or
Right.
might be a guy that can supplant Lorenzo Carter. Oh, we don't
Mhm.
need you this year. We got somebody else on this side of the field as well. So it's
Exactly.
just those are the type of things that you have to think about when making these moves
Mhm.
because there's value in the fourth round. There's
Oh,
value
yeah.
in the fifth round. You know
Yep.
how we know it's value in the fifth round? Because Grady Jarrett,
Great
the guy I
Jerry
just
came from
mentioned,
the
who
fifth
was really
round.
good, he was
Exactly.
drafted in the fifth
That
round out of
happened.
Clemson. So,
Yes.
and I think the Falcons have done a good job of finding value in those later
Mhm.
rounds. So I
Yeah.
don't think those picks should be throwaway picks for
Right.
guys who aren't going to be around for a long time.
I would agree as well. And also, you think about the fact that Cordero Patterson is on his way back. You think
Right.
about who the Falcons will be playing over the course of the next few weeks as it leads into the bye. Teams like my Steelers, teams like the Bears, teams like the Panthers, they get to see them again in 2 weeks. So,
Yeah.
and I think that some of the things that we saw in the game Sunday, I do expect the Falcons to make some adjustments, just like I'm sure the Panthers will do. But my point being, if you have a quote unquote soft schedule as you're awaiting the return of players like an AJ Terrell or a Casey Hayward, then yeah, if the numbers don't line up for you, if the math ain't math for Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith, then if they come back 401 today and there's absolutely nobody that they picked up, certainly okay for that because we know that those guys do a great job at looking at the bigger picture and doing what's right for the Falcons organization, not just for the short term, but for the long term as well. Now,
Absolutely.
speaking of doing what's right, if you guys are looking at doing what's right for your body in not just the short term, for the long term, let me
Better
suggest
be.
you go for Built Bar Puffs. Yes, because these guys are always looking for the long term situation and what's going to help us out. So, the new favorite, as we've talked about to you guys before, but it could be new to you, is cookie dough chunk puffs. They're very light, chewy texture, kind of takes you back to your childhood, and they're 100% chocolate. But the biggest deal for them is that you're talking about 160 calories. And I looked at a drink that I had this morning at work, and I was thinking to myself, I know I didn't just drink 80 calories. Like I know I didn't just drink 90 calories. I know I didn't just drink 100 calories. At least here, if you're going with 160 calories, at least you're getting 15 grams of protein. And it's not just
Right.
any protein, but it's the kind of protein that absorbs into your system very easily. So just remember, healthy, tasty, that's a win-win for you. And look, we love the chunky puffs. You love them, but don't take our word for it. Definitely go and check it out yourself. You might need a snack for workout. You might need a late night snack, or if you're out in these ATL streets and this traffic gets you and it's a hot mess, this might help to keep you calm. So go to built.com, use the promo code locked on 15, and you can get 50% off your first order. Again, that's promo code locked on 15 at built.com. Check out the chunky puffs. And you know what you should do as well? Put a note in the comments and let us know how you like them.